The outcast. The crystal towers of Zephyria glowed in the morning light. People ran through the streets, their blue skin shining with fear. Mothers grabbed their children. Shop owners closed their doors. Everyone knew what the dark clouds gathering above meant. She was coming. Run. The monster is here, someone shouted. From the shadows of an alley, Lyra watched them run. Her heart felt heavy. She wasn't a monster, but that's what everyone called her. Unlike the other Zephyrians with their smooth blue skin, Lyra's skin had crystal-like patches that glowed when she felt strong emotions. Right now, they were glowing dim blue with her sadness. She just wanted to buy food from the market. Was that too much to ask? But every time she showed her face, panic spread through the streets. Lyra was about to turn back when she heard a child's cry. Looking up, she saw a young Zephyrian girl standing on a balcony. The old building was shaking from all the people running past it. Pieces of crystal were falling from above. Without thinking, Lyra ran into the street. Her crystal patches began to glow bright white. The crowd screamed louder when they saw her, but she didn't care. The little girl was in danger. A large piece of crystal broke off the building, falling straight toward the child. Lyra raised her hands. Energy flowed through her crystal patches, creating a shield of light above the girl. The falling crystal shattered against it, turning to harmless dust. "Get away from her," the girl's mother screamed, running out to grab her child. "I was just trying to help," Lyra said softly, but the mother was already running away, holding her daughter tight. More people gathered at a safe distance, pointing and whispering. Lyra could hear their words clearly with her sensitive ears. "Look at those crystal growths on her skin. It's not natural. She could kill us all with those powers. Why doesn't she leave us in peace?" Lyra pulled her hood tighter around her face. Maybe they were right. Maybe she should leave. But where would she go? Suddenly, a new sound filled the air. Everyone looked up as a strange ship descended from the clouds. It was unlike anything the Zephyrians had ever seen, sleek and silver instead of their crystal ships. The crowd's fear turned to curiosity. The ship landed in the town square, and strange creatures emerged. They walked on two legs like Zephyrians, but had pale skin in different shades. Humans, Lyra realized. She had read about them in the old books she studied during her lonely days. One of the humans, a tall male with dark skin and kind eyes, stepped forward. He held up his hands to show he meant no harm. "We come in peace," he said in broken Zephyrian. "I am David Chen, scientist from Earth." The town leaders rushed forward to greet the humans, eager to show their hospitality. No one noticed Lyra anymore. She started to slip away, but then the human called David looked in her direction. Their eyes met. Instead of fear or disgust, Lyra saw something different in his gaze, curiosity and wonder. He took a step toward her. Lyra's crystal patches glowed brighter, this time with a mix of fear and hope. The crowd noticed and began to shout warnings to the humans. "Stay away from her. She's dangerous. She's a monster." But David didn't run. Instead, he smiled and said in careful Zephyrian, "Your crystals, they're beautiful." Lyra froze. In all her life, no one had ever called her beautiful. Her patches glowed with a new color, soft pink with surprise and joy. "The way they change color," David continued, taking another step closer. "It's amazing. Would you tell me how they work?" Before Lyra could answer, the town leaders moved between them. "Dr. Chen, please. You don't understand. She's not safe. She's not normal." David looked at the leaders, then back at Lyra. "Sometimes," he said, "the most extraordinary things appear strange at first. But that doesn't make them monsters." For the first time in her life, Lyra felt seen, not as a monster, but as someone worth understanding. Maybe, just maybe, these humans could help her find her place in the universe. But as the crowd grew louder and more officials arrived to speak with the humans, Lyra slipped away into the shadows. She had learned long ago not to hope too much. Still, As she made her way home to her cave outside the city, her crystal patches kept glowing that soft pink color. Tomorrow would be another day, and for the first time in years, she looked forward to it. Different from birth. 20 years earlier, in a crystal hospital on Zephyria, a baby's cry echoed through the halls. But this wasn't an ordinary cry. As the baby wailed, small patches of her blue skin began to glow with a bright white light. The nurse almost dropped the newborn. "Doctor, come quickly. Something's wrong." Little Lyra's mother, Sarah, reached for her child. "Let me hold her, please." The doctor rushed in and stopped at the doorway, staring at the glowing infant. In all his years, he had never seen anything like this. The crystal patches on the baby's skin pulsed with each cry. "It's just like the old stories," the nurse whispered. The crystal touched, but they were supposed to be gone. Sarah held her daughter close, ignoring their fears. "She's perfect," she said firmly. But deep inside, she was scared. She knew the stories too. Tales of powerful beings who could channel the planet's energy through crystal growths on their skin. Beings who had been feared, hunted, and finally disappeared. As Lyra grew, her parents tried to hide her difference. They kept her inside their crystal house, away from other children. Her father, Thex, created special clothes to cover her crystal patches, but they couldn't hide everything. One day, when Lyra was 5, she was playing in their garden. A small animal, like a 6-legged rabbit, was hurt. Young Lyra felt sad for it. Her crystal patches began to glow, and suddenly, energy flowed from her hands. The animal's wounds healed instantly. "Mama, look what I did," Lyra called excitedly. But Sarah's face was pale with fear. "Lyra, you must never do that again. Never show anyone what you can do." "But why?" "I helped it." "Because," Sarah hugged her daughter tight, "because not everyone understands special gifts." But keeping secrets wasn't easy, especially when Lyra started school. She wore long sleeves and pants, even in hot weather. Other children thought she was strange and stayed away. Lyra spent her days alone, reading old books in the library about Zephyria's history. Then came the day everything changed. Lyra was 10. During games class, a boy pushed her friend Maya. Without thinking, Lyra reached out to catch her. Her sleeve pulled back, revealing the glowing crystals on her arm. The playground went silent. "Monster," someone shouted. "She's one of them." The crystal touched. Maya, the girl Lyra had just saved, backed away in terror. The teachers called emergency services. Parents rushed to take their children home. That night, angry crowds gathered outside Lyra's house. "She's dangerous. The crystal touched almost destroyed our world once. She has to leave." Lyra's father tried to reason with them. "She's just a child. She hasn't hurt anyone." But fear was stronger than reason. The crowd grew larger, angrier. They threw rocks at the windows. Some carried energy weapons from the old days, designed to fight the crystal touched. Sarah came to Lyra's room, tears in her eyes. "You have to run, my love. Go to the caves outside the city. Your father and I will bring you food when we can." "But why do they hate me?" Lyra asked, crying. Her crystal patches glowed deep blue with sorrow. "They don't hate you," her mother said, touching one of the glowing patches gently. "They fear what they don't understand, but someday they'll see how special you are." That night, 10-year-old Lyra ran from the only home she'd ever known. Through her tears, she saw her crystal patches glowing brighter than ever. But instead of the warm healing light from before, they crackled with defensive energy, responding to her fear. In the caves, alone in the dark, Lyra made herself a promise. She would learn to control her powers. She would prove she wasn't a monster. Someday, she would find others like her, if any still existed. But as the years passed, no others came. She grew up alone, watching her people from afar, helping when she could, even though they feared her. Until the day the humans arrived, and one of them looked at her glowing crystals and saw beauty instead of danger. Now, sitting in her cave after meeting David, Lyra pulled out her most precious possession, an ancient book about the crystal touched. Maybe it was time to finally uncover the truth about what she was. And maybe, just maybe, these humans could help her do it. Her crystal patches glowed with a new color, bright gold, the color of hope. The human connection. David Chen couldn't sleep. Ever since meeting the crystal-touched alien, his mind raced with possibilities. He sat in the human research station, watching recordings of Lyra's glowing patches over and over on his holoscreen. "You're obsessed," his colleague Sarah Martinez said, bringing him coffee. "The town leaders warned us about her." "That's exactly why I'm interested," David replied. "Why are they so afraid?" "Those crystals aren't just decorative. They're channeling pure energy. Do you know what that could mean for Earth? Earth, their dying world. With its failing power grids and depleted resources." David touched the screen where Lyra's crystals glowed. A sudden alarm blared through the station. The lights flickered and died. "Power core failure," Sarah shouted. "The backup generators aren't responding." In the darkness, David saw a familiar glow outside the window. Lyra stood there, her crystal patches pulsing with light. She pointed to herself, then to the station. "Let her in." David ran to the airlock. "Are you crazy?" Sarah grabbed his arm. "The Zephyrians said she's dangerous." But David had already opened the door. Lyra entered cautiously, her crystal patches illuminating the dark room. She approached the failing power core, raised her hands, and something extraordinary happened. The crystals on her skin resonated with the core's frequency. Energy flowed from her body into the machine. The lights came back on, stronger than before. "Impossible," Sarah whispered. "She just recharged a quantum power core by touching it." Lyra swayed, weakened by the effort. David caught her before she fell. "Why did you help us?" he asked. "Because you saw me," Lyra said softly. "Really saw me. Not as a monster. I've been watching your team. I know your world needs energy. Maybe that's why I exist." Over the next few days, David and Lyra worked together. He discovered she could not only channel energy, but transform it. Solar, thermal, even waste energy. She could convert it all into clean power. But something else was happening too. The more time they spent together, the more Lyra's crystals showed new colors. When David made her laugh, a sound she hadn't made in years, they shimmered with rainbow patterns. "Each color means something," she explained. "Blue for sadness, white for power, pink for joy. But these new colors, I've never seen them before." Word spread about the human scientist working with the monster. One morning, a group of Zephyrian officials arrived at the station. "You don't understand the danger," their leader warned. "The crystal touch nearly destroyed our civilization once. Their powers grew too strong, too unpredictable." "Or maybe that's just what you were told," David challenged. "We've been studying your historical records. There are gaps, missing information about the crystal touched." "Why?" The officials shifted uncomfortably. One started to speak but was silenced by a glare from their leader. Later that night, an elderly Zephyrian secretly visited the station. His hand shook as he handed David an ancient data crystal. "I was a historian before they banned research on the crystal touched," he whispered. "What you'll see here, it will change everything. But be careful. Some truths are buried for a reason." As the old man hurried away, Lyra emerged from the shadows. Her crystals glowed with a new color, deep purple, the color of mystery. "I've never seen records about my kind," she said. "My parents only knew stories." David inserted the data crystal into his computer. As the files loaded, Lyra gasped. On the screen were images of ancient Zephyrians, their bodies covered in crystal patches just like hers. But they weren't monsters. They were healers, energy weavers, protectors. "There's more," David said, his voice tight with excitement. "According to this, your people didn't almost destroy civilization. They tried to save it. Before he could continue, warnings blared across the station. Something massive was approaching Zephyria's atmosphere. Something that made Lyra's crystals pulse with a color she'd never shown before. Burning silver, the color of destiny. "David," she said, staring at the sky. I think they're coming back." The human scientist looked at his instruments, then at Lyra. Whatever was coming, it would change both their worlds forever. But as he watched Lyra's crystals shimmer with that strange silver light, he knew one thing for certain. He would stand by her side, no matter what. Because sometimes the most beautiful things in the universe are the ones that everyone else fears. The truth emerges. The silver light in the sky grew brighter. Inside the human research station, David worked frantically to decode more files from the ancient data crystal. Lyra paced nearby, her crystal patches pulsing with that new silver glow. Suddenly, all her crystals flashed bright white. She dropped to her knees, overwhelmed by a strange sensation. "They're calling me," she whispered. "The ones in the sky. I can feel them." The station's sensors went crazy. 7 ships, each the size of a small city, appeared through Zephyria's clouds. They weren't like normal spaceships. They seemed to be made entirely of living crystal, glowing with the same light as Lyra's patches. By the stars, Sarah breathed, staring at her screens. "They're putting out more energy than 1,000 suns." The Zephyrian government called an emergency meeting. Panic spread through the cities. But inside the research station, David had finally cracked the encrypted files. "Lyra," he said, his voice shaking, "you need to see this." The ancient recording showed a massive chamber filled with crystal-touched Zephyrians. They stood in a circle, their patches glowing as they channeled energy into a giant crystal core. 300 years ago, the narrator explained, our sun began to die. The crystal-touched used their powers to keep our world alive. But the council feared their growing strength. Instead of gratitude, they responded with fear. The recording showed the horrible truth. The council hadn't banished the crystal-touched. They had tried to destroy them. But some escaped in great crystal ships, vowing to return when they were needed most. The prophecy. An old Zephyrian text appeared. When the lost ones return, the great change begins. Lyra's crystals blazed with understanding. "We weren't monsters," she said. "We were guardians. The crystal patches. They're not a mutation. They're an adaptation. Our bodies evolved to channel energy because our world was dying." Before David could respond, the station door burst open. Armed Zephyrian guards rushed in, led by the council leader. "Step away from her," he ordered David. "The girl comes with us." "No." David stood between them. "And Lyra, you've lied about her people for generations. You turned them into monsters because you feared their power." "We feared what they could become," the council leader shouted. "You've seen what one crystal-touched can do. Imagine thousands. They could reshape worlds." "That's exactly what we did." A new voice rang out. Everyone turned. A figure stood in the doorway, tall and regal. Crystal patches covered most of their blue skin, glowing with rainbow colors. Behind them, more crystal-touched appeared. "I am Zora," the leader said, "first guardian of the Crystal Fleet. We are the descendants of those who fled. For 3 centuries, we've traveled the stars, learning to control our powers, waiting for the right moment to return." She looked at Lyra with kind eyes. "Child, you are not alone. You never were." Lyra's crystals pulsed in harmony with Zora's. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she felt, for the first time, the presence of others like her. But the council leader wasn't finished. He raised a weapon, ancient technology designed to disrupt crystal energy. "Stay back. We won't let you take control." "Control." Zora laughed softly. "We're not here to rule. We're here to save you, all of you. Your son is dying again. That's why she was born." She pointed to Lyra. "The first crystal-touched born on Zephyria in 300 years. A sign that we are needed once more." The weapon in the council leader's hand sparked and died. Lyra stood straighter, her crystals blazing with newfound confidence. "I understand now," she said, "why I could never fully control my powers. I wasn't meant to do it alone." She turned to David. "And I understand why you came to our world." David nodded. "Earth's energy crisis. The dying power grids. Your world suffers as ours once did," Zora said. "Perhaps that is no coincidence. The universe has a way of bringing together those who can help each other." Outside, the crystal ships began to orbit Zephyria in a perfect pattern. Their light merged, creating a protective shield around the planet. The council leader lowered his weapon, finally understanding the truth. Their saviors hadn't come to destroy them. They had come home. But as Lyra watched the ships above, her crystals suddenly pulsed with dark red. A warning. Something was wrong. The sun's energy readings were falling faster than anyone had predicted. They didn't have much time. To save 2 worlds, the crystal touched would need to attempt something never done before. And Lyra, the lost child of 2 ages, would stand at the center of it all. Her crystals glowed with that burning silver light again. But this time, she understood what it meant. It was the color of destiny. The test. The 7 crystal ships hung in Zephyria's sky like a crown of stars. Below, in the great crystal chamber of the ancient temple, Lyra stood surrounded by her newfound people. Her patches glowed in sync with the 50 other crystal-touched who had returned home. But something was wrong. Very wrong. "The sun's decay is accelerating," Zora announced, her voice heavy. "We have weeks, not months as we thought. And Earth," she looked at David, "your world's power grid is failing faster than predicted." David showed them the latest readings from Earth. Cities were going dark. Hospitals were losing power. Millions were in danger. 2 worlds, Lyra whispered. 2 dying worlds. The crystal touched had gathered in a circle, just like in the ancient recording. Energy flowed between them, their combined power keeping Zephyria's failing sun stable. But even their united strength wasn't enough. "There might be a way," said Elder Kex, the oldest of the returned crystal touched. "But the cost." His patches darkened to deep gray, the color of dread. He explained the impossible choice. The crystal touched could save 1 world, but not both. Their power, even combined, wasn't enough for 2 dying stars. Unless. Lyra stepped forward. "Unless someone could amplify our power. Someone born of both ages, the old crystal touched and the new." The chamber went silent. Everyone stared at her. "No," David grabbed her arm. "You saw the readings. That much energy would tear you apart." But Lyra's crystals blazed with determination. A new color appeared, burning gold mixed with silver. The color of sacrifice. "I'm different from the others," she said. "My crystals grew while exposed to our dying sun. They adapted. That's why they show colors the others can't make." She touched one of her patches. "I'm a bridge between past and future. That's why I was born here, why I stayed when everyone feared me." The Zephyrian council members, who had been watching silently, stepped forward. "We were wrong about you," the council leader admitted, "but we can't ask you to die for us." "She won't die," a small voice said. Everyone turned. A young crystal-touched girl named Mira stood up. Her patches glowed with simple, pure white light. "The prophecy doesn't end with the return," she said. "There's more." She held up an ancient crystal shard. "When the bridge between worlds gives all, a new power will be born." Zara took the crystal shard, read the ancient text. Her eyes widened. The girl is right. Lyra wouldn't be channeling the energy. She would be transforming it, creating a new kind of power, one that could sustain both worlds. "But it's never been done," Elder Kex warned. "The strain could still kill her." "Then help me," Lyra said. She looked at David, then at her fellow crystal-touched. "All of you. Humans, Zephyrians, crystal-touched. Stand with me." David stepped forward first, then Sarah, then others from the research team. The council members joined them. Crystal touched from the ships landed and entered the chamber. Soon, hundreds stood together. Lyra took her place in the center. The other crystal-touched formed circles around her, their patches beginning to glow. Humans and Zephyrians joined hands, completing the pattern. As Lyra raised her hands, her crystals blazed brighter than ever before. Energy flowed into her from every direction. From the dying sun, from Earth's failing grids, from every crystal touched in the room. Her patches began to change. New crystals grew, spreading across her skin in fractal patterns. The light became blinding. Then something impossible happened. The energy flowing through her didn't just multiply, it transformed. New frequencies, new patterns, new possibilities. Power that could renew a dying star and sustain a failing world. But as the energy built to its peak, Lyra screamed. The choice had come. The test was here. And the next few moments would determine the fate of two worlds. Sacrifice. Time seemed to stop in the crystal chamber as Lyra screamed. Her body had become pure light, crystal patches spreading across her entire form. The energy flowing through her was beyond anything the universe had ever seen. Through the pain, she saw visions. Past. Crystal-touched ancestors channeling power to save their world. Present. Earth's cities going dark, children in hospitals as power failed. Future. Two possibilities, life or death for billions. Something's wrong. David shouted. Her crystals are cracking. He was right. The new crystal formations spreading across her skin were fracturing under the strain. Light leaked from the cracks like solar flares. Don't break the circle, Zara commanded as people began to step back in fear. She needs all of us. Lyra felt herself slipping away. The power was too much. Then she heard a small voice. Look. Young Mira pointed at the ground. Where Lyra's energy touched the temple floor, impossible things were growing. Crystal flowers, glowing with their own light. Each one pulsed with new energy, neither Zephyrian nor Earth-like, but something entirely new. The prophecy, Elder Kex whispered, when life blooms from crystal tears. But he couldn't finish. The chamber began to shake. Above them, through the crystal dome, they could see the sun turning dark. Earth's power grid readings dropped to critical levels. It was now or never. Lyra opened her eyes, now glowing like twin stars. When she spoke, her voice echoed with the power of ages. I understand now. The crystal touched weren't meant to just channel energy. We were meant to create it. Her body rose into the air, suspended by streams of light. The crystal flowers multiplied, spreading across the floor, up the walls, reaching toward her like children to a mother. Lyra. David tried to reach her, but the energy field was too strong. You don't have to do this alone. I'm not alone, she said, smiling through her tears. I never was. Not since you saw me. Not since they returned. Not since we all stood together. Then she did something that shocked everyone. She began to sing. It wasn't a normal song. It was pure energy transformed into sound. The crystal flowers sang back. Then the crystal touch joined in, their patches harmonizing with her frequency. The humans and Zephyrians felt it too, a vibration in their cells, calling them to add their voices. The chamber filled with a song of life itself. And as they sang, Lyra's breaking crystals began to heal. But they weren't returning to their original form. They were becoming something new. Her entire body transformed into a living crystal, but not solid like before. She became like flowing light given form, energy made flesh. Power burst from her in waves. The first wave hit Zephyria's sun, and the dying star blazed with new life. The second wave reached Earth through the crystal ship's network, restoring and transforming every power grid it touched. But the third wave changed everything. Every person in the chamber, crystal-touched or not, felt something awaken inside them. Tiny crystal seeds, dormant since the dawn of both races, stirred to life. The gift was always meant for everyone. Lyra's voice echoed. Not just a few, not just one race. The power to create, to transform, to heal. Her light began to fade, and she floated down. David caught her as she fell. But when she opened her eyes, they all gasped. She wasn't dying. She was transforming. Her crystal patches had become like living stained glass, shifting with rainbow colors they'd never seen before. "Look," she whispered to David, touching his hand. Where she touched him, tiny crystal patches began to grow. Not like hers, but unique to him. Around the chamber, similar patches appeared on others, each person's different, each one beautiful. Evolution, Sarah breathed, watching her own small crystals form. Not just adaptation. The next step. But before anyone could respond, alarms blared. Something massive was happening in space, beyond their sun. Lyra stood, her new form blazing with power. She looked at her transformed family, human, Zephyrian, and crystal-touched alike. "It's not over," she said. "The gift comes with a responsibility. And I think we're about to find out what it is." The crystal ship's sensors showed something impossible approaching from deep space. The real test was just beginning. Beauty in the monster. The deep space anomaly grew larger on their screens. Through the crystal dome of the temple, they could see a darkness spreading across the stars, a void that devoured light itself. "The Great Hunger," Elder Keck said, his transformed crystals pulsing with ancient memory. "The real reason our ancestors began to change. Not just to save our sun, but to save everything." Lyra stood in her new form, her living crystal body shifting with colors beyond normal sight. The crystal flowers around her feet had spread throughout the temple, each one a tiny new star. "We were never meant to be guardians of just two worlds," she realized. "We're seed bearers, life carriers." The sensors showed the truth. The void wasn't just consuming light. It was unraveling reality itself. The universe was dying, just as their suns had been. But now they had the power to fight back. David touched his new crystal patches, which glowed in harmony with Lyra's. The transformation. It wasn't just about energy, was it? "No," Zara said, understanding flowing through her like starlight. "It's about creation itself. Life finding new ways to survive." Young Mira stepped forward, her small form now wrapped in crystal light. The ancient prophecy crystal in her hands had transformed too, revealing its final message. "When darkness drinks the stars above, when void threatens all we love, the changed will rise, both new and old, to plant the seeds of light untold." Lyra looked at her transformed family, humans, Zephyrians, and original crystal-touched, now all bearing the gifts of change. Each person's crystals were unique, like fingerprints of light. "Together then," she said, her voice carrying the power of new stars. They formed a circle again, but this time was different. The crystal flowers rose up, creating a living cathedral of light. Energy flowed not just between them, but through the very fabric of space. As the void approached, Lyra began to sing again. But this wasn't the song of transformation. This was the song of creation itself. The crystal ships joined their power, forming a spiral of light in space. Every transformed being on both worlds added their voice to the chorus. The crystal flowers multiplied exponentially, each one a seed of new reality. When the void touched their light, something miraculous happened. Instead of darkness consuming light, light transformed darkness. The void became a canvas, and they were the artists, painting new constellations with their combined power. Lyra rose into the air one final time, but now she wasn't alone. David, Zara, Mira, and thousands of others rose with her, their combined light forming a tapestry of creation. "The universe doesn't need monsters or saviors," Lyra's voice echoed through space itself. "It needs gardeners, creators, dreamers." From their bodies, crystal seeds streaked across space like comets. Where they landed in the void, new stars were born. New possibilities bloomed. The darkness that had threatened to devour everything became the soil for a new kind of universe, one where light and dark danced together, where energy could never truly die, only transform. Years later, children on Earth and Zephyria would gather to hear the story. They would look at their own small crystal patches just beginning to grow and ask about the monster who became a master gardener. And Lyra, her form still shifting with the light of new stars, would tell them the truth. There was never a monster, only fear of change, only the reluctance to become something new. The real beauty wasn't in the crystals or the power. She would touch each child's growing crystals, watching them glow with possibilities. The real beauty was in learning to see yourself through loving eyes, in finding family among the stars, in discovering that the very things that make you different might just help you save the universe. Above them, the crystal flowers would bloom across space, seeds of light scattered through the cosmos, waiting to grow. And in the heart of every new star, a single truth would pulse like a heartbeat. The greatest power in the universe isn't destruction or preservation. It's transformation. The end.